Well, good morning again, and Happy New Year again. For anyone who is new or hasn't met me, my name is Keren Tischler, and I think this is maybe my third time offering a message to the fellowship. I just want to also offer my gratitude for everyone here and online, but also for all the people in COOF who make this happen. I know there's a lot that goes into this, and so just appreciating you and your effort and your commitment to this. So the theme this month is story, and I'm doing my best to try and honor that. Since we are now safely 3 weeks beyond the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, the longest night of the year, and we have a whopping 8 hours and 39 minutes of daylight today, I thought it would be fun to consider how stories that are rooted in seasonal cycles can help us harvest meaning from either the cosmically or emotionally dark times that we experience, while also turning toward the light that is beginning to rise. And it will faithfully rise outside, and looking with curiosity to see what emerges within. I had this holiday card that had picture. It was an artwork of the shorebird, the red knot, flying across the front of it. On the back, it said endurance. And I'll just explain why a little bit. Many species of birds undergo a long and improbable migration journey twice a year to get between their breeding and their wintering grounds. So unlike us who tough it out in the winter, they actually go find another home for a while. Shorebirds, including birds like godwits, the red knot that I mentioned, and sanderlings, undergo the longest migrations of all the birds, covering over 8,000 miles each way each time they make a migration. And they do this in kind of epic and sometimes nonstop journeys that involve first gaining a ton of weight and fat and then burning it as they fly. And somehow they remain capable of flight throughout their journey. As remarkable as that sounds, many other bird species undergo their migration exclusively under the cover of darkness. Nocturnal migration is probably helpful to birds in that there are fewer predators out at night. And some birds actually use a star compass for their navigation. That said, it is a pretty wondrous thing to look at a full moon sometime during this migration period and see birds flying across the moon, and they're actually singing to each other while they're doing it. Although I wouldn't have chosen a journey that I was on this last year with my husband when he suddenly collapsed at work in September. The fact that it happened around the fall equinox actually offered a little bit of comfort to me. And that comfort was in two forms. One, I can trust the cycle of life. I can trust that when the light diminishes, it will return in some fashion. That in the spring, the birds will again migrate. Life continues, though it does change. And two, that darkness is a less active time, not only for the predators of birds, but also for humans. And so it offers the space that might be needed for healing. So if you would just think for a moment about the stories that you tell yourself about darkness, whether that's physical darkness or dark times in life. Is darkness a time for courageous journeys into the unknown? Is it a time for rest and renewal? Is darkness to be feared and avoided? Is it a time that things happen when we really don't want them to happen? Or maybe you're somewhere in between, or it just really depends on the thing and the time. I recently heard a story on NPR, and maybe you did also, that is about the annual New Year ritual celebrated by the indigenous Nisqually people of Washington State. This ritual is celebrated over a fire and under the moon on the threshold of winter solstice. For the Nisqually, the darkest day is a time to remember themselves into their creation story. This is a story that establishes a sacred relationship between them and salmon. It's said that at the beginning of time, salmon offered themselves to the Nisqually people, and in return, they were instructed to care for the salmon. For the Nisqually people, remembering involves renewing and breathing new life into an intention into an already existing contract with salmon in this case. And doing so with Grandma Moon, the caretaker of all life, as witness. It's also a time to consider time itself. In the words of Melina Fairlight Pinkham, who is a tribal member, salmon tastes like time, 10,000 years of time. In eating salmon, they can feel their ancestors and their descendants. Wow. During this ritual, gifts are given, including bits of salmon to a fire. Prayers are offered for what is ahead. And it's a time to, quote, feel the expectant earth shift towards spring and awaken to imbalances or disconnects that might have arisen in this sacred relationship. Like how 7 months of fishing has been reduced to 7 days as a result of overfishing, logging, pollution, development, dams, etc. It is simultaneously a time to celebrate, though. Like how in this past month, chum salmon ran back into the Nisqually River at numbers not seen for decades. So on the morning of the winter solstice this year, my husband and I bundled up and we headed out into the darkness. I sent my gratitude and my prayers into the dark sky, and then I laid down in the snow for a while, which is kind of my fashion. After returning to the house, I lit a Yule log and sat nearby the wood stove to write in their combined light. I say this, though, as though my ancestors and I have been doing that ritual for 10,000 years. No. Well, I can't speak for my ancestors. I can affirm that this was our very first Yule log. And it came to us like the salmon to the Nisqually, perhaps, somewhat serendipitously. Several days earlier, as I was suiting up for a snowshoe, I heard a vehicle pull into our driveway. Looking out the window, I saw a large, unfamiliar white truck, and out of it came my friend Rick, ambling up the driveway with this birch log decked with conifer branches and inset with 3 candles. I immediately recognized what it was, though I've actually never seen one before. He made it, as it turns out, and brought it to me on a whim. We don't see each other all that often. In fact, I probably hadn't seen this friend for 3 years when he texted me in September from the Marquette Hospital parking lot in the days after my husband's incident and asked if he could visit me in the ICU waiting room. His short visit with me there ended with him opening his wallet and stuffing a crisp $100 bill into my pocket, saying, "You're going to need this." Okay. As it happens, another friend who was integral support during this time also gave me something around the solstice that I didn't know that I needed. Shortly after the Yule log arrived, she sent me a writing about the winter solstice, which pointed out that the solstice not only marks an important day length threshold, but also an increase in soil life and activity. They call it vitality. I was gathering what they meant maybe was like soil respiration. The critters who live in the soil are starting to become active when the light rises. Now, that may not be the case in places where we have snow cover, so let's not get too excited yet. Regardless, what stood out for me in this message was that this happens whether we notice it or not. The light will rise whether we take note or not. Life will rise whether we take note or not. And the invitation was to let the winter solstice mark the time to notice and turn toward this wonderful shift. To be curious about the next cycle of life and what is naturally arising. And rather than forcing our will upon it and deciding what is going to happen in this next year, to step out of our own way and co-create the already unfolding path. How do we step out of our own way? I wondered. I often wonder. When I think of stepping out of my own way, it feels like maybe like instinct, like a bird that knows where it's going during migration. Maybe we might call that intuition. Maybe it involves a kind of knowing that's not born of the intellect so much as it's born in the heart, like one of our wise young people told us this morning. As I laid in the snow on solstice morning, I was facing north in the direction that to me represents earth energy and the season of winter. And I thought, this is the season for grounding. It's the season of coming home to ourselves and our true nature, our purpose, maybe letting our intuition rise. It's a time for remembering, as the Nisqually do, and cultures of people have done in their own way for eons the world over. This is the season for noticing places where we may be in imbalance, where we may have disconnected and metabolizing what no longer serves. Like a migrating bird metabolizes part of its own body to get itself to where it's going. In the Nisqually tradition, they might offer that as bits of salmon to a fire. Something that turns into nutrient for the next cycle of life. So, what do you harvest from stories like this and from the seasonal cycles that is really so strong where we live? What do you harvest during the time of wintering and standing at this threshold between winter and spring energy? Threshold times offer space for acknowledging that which is difficult and renewing our contract with that which is life-giving. Maybe you've been experiencing a health challenge, or you're concerned about someone in your family, or you've lost someone in your family recently. Maybe you're a caregiver. Maybe you're concerned about the future of our country. Maybe you're concerned about the well-being of others on this planet. When we look at renewing our contract with life, can we see the process not as a rigid and a forced one, but as an allowing of the light that is naturally rising, a returning to our deepest, our most true story? We're returning to our migration path, finding it wherever that may be, and beginning again. Can we consider this time as a time to hold up a mirror and see ways where we may be off kilter or off balance or have gone astray a little bit? And also celebrate the places where we are in alignment with our deepest, most held truth. Can we even see the gifts of darkness that we didn't ask for? Sometimes I think this takes time, and it's not to be forced. Can this coming home be a motivation, a fuel to give us the endurance for the journey ahead? Knowing the certainty of dark times along the way and the certainty that dark times will return. So as I was laying in the snow and I was facing north, I then got up and turned east and in the direction of the sunrise. And so metaphorically, as we turn east toward the light that is already beginning to rise, can we feel a twinge of hope rising in us also? The hope that the sun has never failed to rise. The awareness that whatever it is that's happening that feels dark, that this too shall pass. And perhaps a memory of our unearthed own inner light. Nearly 4 years ago, on a chilly January 20th, 22-year-old poet Amanda Gorman stood before a masked and socially distanced outdoor crowd in front of our US Capitol, wearing a bright yellow coat. I really appreciate in hindsight that she was wearing yellow, given the message today. and delivered a poem on the event of Joe Biden's inauguration. A poem that she finished writing not too long before that, that included words after what happened on January 6th of that year at the Capitol. Still, she managed to offer a poem of light and hope. And the last lines of her poem, as you probably remember, are, "When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms and we free it. For there is always light, if only we are brave enough to see it. If only we are brave enough to see it." Now that we sit at the brink of what may feel like a darkness to be feared, let us remember our light. Let us remember our sacred contract with life. Let us be brave enough to be the light, no matter. Let us be brave enough to see the light in others. Thank you.